So we'll get started on Naphtali here. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm getting over a head cold, so if I sound a little sniffly or I cough, I apologize if it's loud. So, all right. So we'll get started here with Naphtali. And so Naphtali is the sixth son of Jacob, but he is the second son of Bilhah, who is Rachel's handmaid. If we remember the story of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah, he ends up marrying the oldest sister. He gets tricked into that and ends up really marrying the one that he really wanted, who was the younger sister, Rachel. Leah has children first. We've learned of some of those. And then Rachel becomes jealous, and she is barren at this point and ends up giving her handmaid, Bilhah, and had Dan as well as Naphtali. Dan was the first son. Naphtali is the second of Rachel's handmaid, which in those times, those children ended up being the kind of the lady of the house, or Rachel in this instance, ended up being her children. So we learn about the man, his sons here, Jehiel, Guni, Heser, Shillem, and we find those in Genesis and Numbers, and they're all listed that way. And then the descendants of those individuals there in First Chronicles, you can find that. The ensign for the camp was the deer, and that's again mostly based off of Jewish tradition. We can also tie it to Jacob's prophecy when we get there and learn about that. And so here is that mosaic that we've been looking at, and so the deer is kind of straight across, kind of at that 9 o'clock position there. They were encamped on the north side. If we remember that we've got the 4 cardinal directions, and then each camp in that direction was split, and there were 3 tribes in each one of those camps. And so on the north side, the head camp was Dan, that Naphtali was in with the tribe of Dan there. They were fourth. They brought up the rear in marching rank when they headed out or went to fight battles. Naphtali literally brought up the end. And then there's their census. They're at the beginning of Numbers versus the end of Numbers, and they actually decreased by 8,000 individuals. No indication as why that happened, if they were part of potentially some of the plagues, some of the other things that went on, or if they were just a larger number of individuals when they came out of Egypt into the land. And because we know that with people that due to their unfaith, there was an entire generation of individuals that died in the wilderness and didn't see the promised land. So the head of the tribe is listed there in Numbers, and they offered on the 12th day in the tabernacle when that was erected. So the tribe itself, their land allotment, they were of the 6th lot and one of the northernmost land areas that was given to the tribe of Naphtali. It was between the Jordan River and the tribe of Asher on the coast. And so here are the different maps that you can find. And so on that first one, it's kind of that neon green, and the middle one, it's the pink there at the north. You have Asher and then Naphtali coming from the Mediterranean Sea. And then the one on the far right there in the orange is the tribe of Naphtali. And so different resources can give you slightly different boundaries for this. So that's why I like to give multiple resources for you to be able to look at. But for the most part, fairly similar with that. And so if we remember from last week, the tribe of Dan was on the south, on the coast, and they moved up. And so now Dan, once they find their new land in the north, Naphtali borders them as well. So in Judges, we're told that they didn't drive out the Canaanites, but they did receive tribute from them, meaning that the Canaanites paid them in some form or fashion to be able to live in the land, and you can find that there in Judges. They were part of the tribes that stood on Mount Ebal to pronounce the curses. And so if we remember that, that you have Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim pronouncing the blessings and the cursings if they obeyed or disobeyed the Lord. They're listed as they fought bravely under Barak and Deborah in the book of Judges. And I'd like to read a portion of that because we really don't know a whole lot about the tribe of Naphtali, but this is one thing that is listed with them. So if you go to the book of Judges and you start in chapter 4, and so we'll read a chunk of chapter 4, but then it does go into chapter 5 with Barak and Deborah's song. So, and starting in Judges chapter 4, and it says, "And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead." So we're going through the period here in Judges where they obey, they're under the leadership of one of the judges, and then they fall away, they come back. And so we're a period of obeying and a period of disobeying. And so we're working through that as you go through the book of Judges. And then in verse 2 here, "And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose host was Sisera, which dwelt in Hasoreth of the Gentiles. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time." So here we have a female judge over the nation of Israel. "And she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel and Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called for Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and the children of Zebulun? And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and with his multitude, and I will deliver him unto thine hand. And Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go." So he's being told, hey, you're supposed to do this. And he's giving back, you have to come with me. If you don't come with me, I'm not going to go. And she said, I will surely go, and thee notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor, for the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite, which is of the children of Hobab, who is Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, had served himself from the Kenites, and pitched his tent unto the plain of Zenaim, which is by Kadesh. And they showed Sisera that Barak the son of Abinoam was gone up to Mount Tabor. And Sisera gathered together all his chariots, even 900 chariots of iron, and all the people that were with him from Hasheroth of the Gentiles unto the river Kishon. And Deborah said unto Barak, Up, for this day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera unto thine hand, is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from the Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. And the Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his host with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and fled away on his feet. But Barak pursued after the chariots and after the host unto Hasarasheth of the Gentiles, and all of the host of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword. and there was not a man left. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. And when he had turned in unto her into the tent, she covered him with a mantle. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him drink and covered him. Again he said unto her, Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be, when any man doth come and inquire of thee, and say, Is there any man here? Thou shalt say, No. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent, and took the hammer in her hand, and went softly unto him, and smote the nail into his temples, and fastened it to the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him, and said unto him, Come, and I will show thee the man whom thou seekest. And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the nail was in his temples. So God subdued on that day Jabin the king of Canaan before the children of Israel, and the hand of the children of Israel prospered and prevailed against Jabin the king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin the king of Canaan. So here we have the first woman judge. We also have a woman who kills the commander of the army by driving a nail through his temples for the Lord in all of this. And then in chapter 5, you have Barak and Deborah's song about this victory that the Lord has given them. And over in verse 21 is where it talks about that the river Kishon swept them away, the ancient river, O river Kishon, O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength. So what happens during this is that there is a flash thunderstorm and a flash flood that happens that renders all of Sisera's chariots essentially stuck in the mud, and they're not able to use them. And that is how Israel wins this battle. So you have that there, but there's 10,000 men with the tribe of Naphtali and one other tribe that help in the tribe of Zebulun. So that go and help fight with Barak in this. So they are also one of the tribes that answered Gideon's call against the Midianites and Amalekites, and you can find that in the very next chapter in Judges there of 6 and chapter 7. They also fought with David at Hebron. 1,000 captains, and with them 37,000 men are listed in Chronicles. They are one of the tribes that revolted against Rehoboam, who was King Solomon's son, the king of Judah, and split off as the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom, which is Israel. They were ravaged by the Syrian king Ben-Hadad under King Asa's reign, and a league was formed with them with gifts of gold and silver. And they were one of the first tribes to be carried away by the king of Assyria, Tilgath-Pilser under King Pekah. Excuse me. And they were ones in the promised land that was taken away, and it was Dan and the tribe of Naphtali. So one of the prominent members, we just learned about him, Barak. His name actually means lightning or lightning flash, and we read that account there in Judges 4. The son of Abinoam from Kadesh Naphtali was called to the battle against Sisera, the captain of the Canaanite king, Jabin. And he won't go to battle without Deborah, the prophetess, and the judge. But really, I think what he's saying there is he saying, I'm not going to go. I need to know that the Lord is with me. And that's why he's asking for Deborah to come with, because she was the judge at the time with that. And then again, the 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun. And then there it is during the great, the battle, the thunderstorm arose on the Kishon River and flooded the plains allowing all of those chariots to become stuck. And then in Hebrews, he's actually listed as one of the individuals of the faithful patriarchs. And that is in Hebrews 11, verse 32. And it says, "And what shall I more say? For the time would fall me to tell of Gideon and of Barak and of Samson and of Jephthah, of David also and of Samuel, and of the prophets." And so we have him mentioned in the New Testament. One other very minor mention of a prominent member is an individual named Hiram, different from Hiram, the king that is helping Solomon. This is a different Hiram, but he is the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, but he was one of the individuals who was chosen as a worker of brass for the temple that Solomon was building. And he's listed as he was filled with wisdom and understanding and cunning to work all the works of brass. And that's all that's mentioned, literally, for the tribe of Naphtali. There's not a lot of information for prominent members from this tribe. And so here we'll move to the blessing and prophecy from Jacob. And so for Naphtali, Jacob blesses this son and says, "Naphtali is a hind let loose, he giveth goodly words." Excuse me. So a hind let loose. So a hind, a deer, a doe, some kind of animal like that, let loose. And when you look at let loose, the word is, the number is 7971. It's salah, and it means send out, send forth, put forth. That same word is actually used when we read the information about when Noah sends out the raven and the dove. It is the same word, to let loose, to send out or send forth. He giveth goodly words. Jesus's ministry actually was in cities of the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, and so it was in the area of Capernaum. So if you flip to Matthew, you actually will find that there. And so that is Matthew chapter 4. And starting in verse 12, it says, "And now when Jesus has heard that John was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee." So this is John the Baptist has been imprisoned. "And leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the sea coast in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea, beyond Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people which sat in darkness saw great light, and to them which sat in the region and shadow of death, light is sprung up." And that is actually where he's quoting from Isaiah 42:7. And then it's also prophesied in Isaiah 9:1-2. "People have seen great light, that they dwell in the land at the shadow of death. Upon them hath the light shined." And that's in Isaiah. Additionally, we find that in Romans, if we're talking about someone moving swiftly as a doe, rapidly and let loose, sending out, sending forth. In Romans 10:15, "How beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things." And that's actually prophesied, and that's quoting Isaiah 52:7. And so his Jacob's prophecy, with what little we know of the tribe of Naphtali, was, of course, it would be the Lord. It was spot on with that, and very prophetic too, with Jesus's ministry that was in that area of the tribe of Naphtali. And so now we move to Moses with his blessing on the tribe of Naphtali, and you'll find that in Deuteronomy 33, verse 23. And it says, "And of Naphtali he said, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full of the blessing of the Lord, possessest thou the west and the south." So this, you could read a lot into this. I'm not going to read a whole lot into it. I think a lot of that has to do with Jesus's ministry again, satisfied with favor and full with the blessing of the Lord because of where Jesus preached in his ministry there. It also is a fertile area around the western part of the Sea of Galilee, which, if you go back and look, is where the southern kind of corner is on the western part of that Sea of Galilee. Jewish tradition states that it was produce that was grown there would ripen as fast as the deer could run, meaning figs, grapes, olives, those types of things. That western side of the Sea of Galilee, very well watered, very green, very fertile, compared to the eastern side of which is very sharp cliffs, very different landscape than what is on that western side there. And so that kind of ties back to ripen as fast as the deer could run, Jacob's prophecy with the hind let loose there. And then the explorer W.M. Thompson, he was a 19th century explorer. His book, The Land and the Book, the second volume, remarked that the hills of Naphtali were the greenest in all of Palestine that he had ever seen. So there, my friends, you have the tribe of Naphtali. We don't have a whole lot of information about them, but that's what I found to be able to share with you. And so here is that area there. Naphtali is there in the blue, and you see the Sea of Galilee, or the Chinnereth Sea. It's also referred to in earlier parts of biblical scripture, but they have the western side of that there on their southeastern corner of that, and a very fertile area there. So there is that. So we will switch now to the tribe of Gad. We're just moving right along here. So now we're on the seventh son, Gad. Gad, his name means troop, fortune, or luck. The root word, in looking that up, actually means to invade, attack, or overcome. So very interesting in that. If we read the account of, he's the seventh son of Jacob, and he's the first son of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid. So we've had Leah has had children. Rachel is barren. Rachel gives her handmaid Bilhah. She has two sons, and now Leah is no longer having children, and so she gives her handmaid. And so there's this very much tit for tat going on between these two sisters, a lot of jealousy happening here. So Zilpah is given, and she bears a son, and Gad is the product of that. And so in Genesis, excuse me, verse 30, Genesis 30, goodness sakes, Genesis 30, verse 10, "And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bare Jacob a son, and Leah said, A troop cometh, and she called his name Gad." And so there is where we get the meaning of his name. He has sons, and they're listed here: Xiphon, Haggai, Shuni, Ezbon, Eri, Arodai, and Areli. And then that's in Genesis. And then in Numbers, they're spelled slightly different. You've got Zephon spelled slightly different, as well as Ezbon is now going by Ozni, is how it's spelled. And then Arodai is like Arod. and they're in Numbers, and then the rest of the descendants and the families are listed there in Chronicles. And so their tribe, the tribe of Gad, is in the Jewish tradition, their ensign is a tent. And so you can see that there at the 7 o'clock position is the tent that symbolizes the tribe of Gad. For a troop, all of those things, it really reminds me more like a military tent in that and what they would dwell in. They were encamped on the south side in the camp in the wilderness with the tribe of Reuben. And so you had Reuben, Simeon, and Gad all in that camp on the south end. And then their census, they were second in marching rank because that is where the tribe of Reuben, that main camp, went out. And so you had Reuben, Simeon, and Gad that followed out after the tribe of Judah and the Levites. Their census from the beginning of Numbers to the end of Numbers decreased by 5,150 individuals. Again, no mention of them in some of the other plagues and things that we've seen in the Old Testament when they were wandering in the wilderness. Again, this could be just a decrease because of that generation that did not see the promised land, that died in the wilderness. The head of the tribe in the wilderness is listed there in Numbers, and they offered on the 6th day in the tabernacle when that was erected. The land that the tribe of Gad, it wasn't allotted to them. They actually chose it. If we remember that the tribe of Reuben, they chose their land before anyone went into the promised land when they were wandering in the wilderness. And so they are what is referred to as one of the Transjordan tribes. Well, Gad is one that chose land on the eastern side of the Jordan River, chose to stay there because of what it looked like. They had large cattle. The land was very fertile, and that's where they chose to stay. So Gad, Reuben, and half of the tribe of Manasseh chooses to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan and does not go into the promised land. Now they do end up fighting with the other tribes to take their land. That is part of the agreement that they come to with Moses in the book of Numbers, that they come to them and say, hey, this is what we'd like. And Moses says, you have to help the other tribes, the other families go in and conquer the land, and they keep that end of the bargain. And so Moses gives them that land and then assigns them cities. Part of this land was an Amorite kingdom of Sihon, and there were cities of Gilead there. Part of the area was called Gilead, like a region of that. And they were given the Amorite cities of Gilead, as well as half of the land of Ammon and Joshua. Their land was between Reuben and Manasseh, so half of Manasseh was on the northern side, and Reuben was on the southern side of their boundaries for the tribe of Gad. This was also part of Bashan, that the tribe of Gad ended up choosing this land for that. And there's a little bit of controversy, which we'll get into with this as we discuss this a little bit further. But they stood on Mount Ebal to pronounce the curses, and they promised to help the others win the land on the western side or in the promised land of the Jordan when they did go into the land. And you can find that in Deuteronomy and in Joshua, multiple places, as well as in Numbers as well, when they come to Moses, Numbers 32, and say, this is what we'd like. And so here is their land. And so you can kind of see from the first map, Gad is the one that's in yellow. It has Gilead kind of written on it, but they're on the eastern side of the Jordan River there. And then the boundaries look fairly different in the middle and the right side map, that there's kind of Manasseh comes down and dips into the land of Gad. And so it's kind of shaped into like a Y, or kind of a claw shaped there, with it compared to that first one, the map. So different resources will tell you that the boundaries are slightly different. Scripture gives us good guidance on that. In some areas, the book of Numbers versus what Joshua, the boundaries might be slightly different. So were there the cities named maybe a little bit differently by the time that you got from one to the other, and this was written down. That could be, but there is some information that's out there, and some resources will say that some of the cities that we're going to talk about are not in the tribal lands of Gad, that they were actually in the area of half Manasseh, or the Transjordan Manasseh that is just to the north of Gad. And so if you look in that middle map there, just above where it says Gad, that first city where it says Jabesh Gilead, that's Jabesh Gilead, that is written in our Bible as with a J. You'll also find that in the purple area on the right-hand map where it's Jabesh Gilead. That city is going to come up multiple times in scriptures we're coming through and learning about the tribe of Gad. But I just want you to be aware, with the studies that I've done, the multiple resources I've looked at, the multiple maps, most of the maps and the resources I've looked at say that Jabesh Gilead is in the tribe of Gad. You're going to find some things that are going to tell you that it's actually in the city, in the tribal lands. That city is in the tribal lands of half Manasseh. So if you find something that's there, that I'm hoping I'm not mistaken in this, that I'm attributing some of the things that we're going to talk about with the tribe of Gad, that I'm attributing it to Gad instead of Manasseh. This is just with the research that I've done and what scripture shows me on this. So again, that city of Jabesh Gilead is not listed as it belongs to these people. There are some places that say that the cities of Gilead are given to the tribe of Gad, and that is listed in scripture. And then there's an area that says that one of the sons of Manasseh is given Gilead. Well, we have to remember that Gilead is a region, and then the cities are given to Gad. So a little bit of confusion there, but I just want to throw that out there. I want to give you guys, I want to be completely transparent in this. So moving on. Let's see. They are all of the eastern tribes, the Reuben, Gad, and half Manasseh. They built an altar by the Jordan where they were misunderstood by the western tribes. And you can read that account in Joshua 22, where they build it. The tribes that have gone into the promised land come back and they think that they're building an altar to another god. And they're saying, no, that's not what we're doing. We're building this so that our children will remember what the Lord has done for us. And so it's an altar signifying them coming out of the wilderness and what the Lord has given them, but they were completely misunderstood in that. They had wealth through cattle and spoils of war, and that's listed in Numbers and in Joshua. They had trouble holding their territory and were at risk of incursions of their neighbors from the Moabites and the Amorites, again, because they didn't necessarily have the strength with all of the other tribes. Only 1.5 other tribes were on the eastern side of that Jordan, and the other 10 tribes were on the western side of that. So it's a little bit harder to call them, to call to arms for the protection of those tribes on that far eastern side. But they fought to drive out the Hagarites, and they were carried away by Assyria with Reuben and that half of Manasseh on the eastern side. And that may be due to some of the idolatry from half of Manasseh, and you can find that account in First Chronicles there, and we'll learn more about that when we get to the tribe of Manasseh, and we'll talk about each side of that. So if you recall the Levite and concubine incidents that we had learned about when we learned about the tribe of Levi, um, when that concubine was dismembered and a part was sent to each one of the tribes, this event that the tribe of Benjamin doesn't come to help. The men of Jabesh Gilead did not show up at Mizpah to go against Benjamin, who is where the Levite and concubine incident happened in Benjamin's land. If you need to refresh on that, I definitely suggest that you read Judges 19 through 21. It gives you all of this information, the background, and what we're talking about now. But the tribe of Benjamin is almost wiped out completely. And so the men of Jabesh Gilead didn't show up to help with this incident. And so they basically look around and say, what happened here? And so they go to Jabesh Gilead and they take 400 virgins from that area and they give them to the tribe of Benjamin so that the tribe of Benjamin will survive. And you can find that there in Judges 21, verses 8 through 12. And when Saul's men are battling the Philistines, they hide themselves in Gad, and that's mentioned in 1 Samuel there. So it was an area where people could run to and hide across the Jordan River. There were warriors who supported David as king, listed as well, and they fought with David at Hebron, and they're numbered with the Reubenites and half Manasseh. So all of those, that 2.5 tribes, the Transjordan tribes, are lumped together there in Chronicles with 120,000 men coming to fight with David at Hebron. Again, they revolted against King Rehoboam, king of Judah. Many of these tribes did and split with the other as part of the 10 tribes that became the northern kingdom of Israel. And so here is the account there. And there's Jabesh Gilead again. And so that's why I wanted to kind of show that to you on those multiple maps, because some maps will show that this Jabesh Gilead that land is attributed to half Manasseh. But I've found multiple, like I said, indications that Jabesh Gilead is actually part of the tribe of Gad. And so the Ammonite king, Nahash, camped against Jabesh Gilead, and they threatened to thrust out all the right eyes. Jabesh sends messengers to all of Israel for help. And the idea that had happened, we've never had seen that before with the Levite and concubine, where he dismembers her and sends her pieces to all 12 tribes. Saul does the exact same thing here, but he cuts up an oxen and sends a piece of the oxen to all of the tribes. 300,000 men of Israel and 30,000 men of Judah show up in Bezek to come and fight for the men of Jabesh Gilead against the Ammonite king. And so there's support there for this, and it's kind of the threat from Saul, is how I see it, that you better show up with this, because this is a reminder to what happened back in that time with the tribe of Benjamin, and then almost being wiped out because of what they let happen in their land with the Levite and concubine in that. The men of Jabesh Gilead are actually the ones who recovered Saul and his sons' bodies when they die in that final battle. There at the end of 1 Samuel, they retrieve the bodies from Mount Gilboa, and they take them back to Jabesh to be buried. And they're blessed by King David in 2 Samuel because of what they did in honoring Saul. And I kind of relate that back to that King Saul comes to their assistance, to the men of the city of Jabesh Gilead, and comes up and defeats the Ammonite king. And maybe this is their way of honoring what he did for them by retrieving their bodies when they are abused Saul and his sons after they are killed. And so, not a lot of prominent members from the tribe of Gad, but Elijah the Tishbite in First Kings. In Jewish tradition, he's from Gilead, but Scripture does not state that he's from Gad. There's nothing solid on this, but it does state that he's from the area of Gilead. And so, not specifically Jabesh Gilead, but Gilead. And so, he could be from half Manasseh as well. He could be from a totally different tribe, and that he is just residing in Gilead, but that he's from there. He was a major prophet during the time of Israel and during the reigns of Ahab and Hazael. He was kind of a John the Baptist type. He's described as having a strange dress there in Second Kings, and he goes against the prophets of Baal in a contest with them, and then he's persecuted by Jezebel after those prophets slew and they're all slaughtered. He ended up hiding in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and he was sustained there by the Lord. He also heard a still small voice, and he is the individual that was carried up to heaven by a whirlwind and did not die. A lot of speculation that Elijah, will be the one, Elijah with a J, will be the one to come back, and he is one of the two witnesses in Revelation, in the book of Revelation. So because it's listed that he did not die, he was taken up into heaven by God. So, and then he ended up passing his mantle to Elisha, Sha. And you can find all of that information about him in First and Second Kings, about Elijah the Tishbite. And so let's go to the prophecy, and blessings. And so Jacob's prophecy for his son Gad is in Genesis 49 in verse 19. And it says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome in the last. Out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Oh, am I reading? Yeah, that is the right one. And so a troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome in the last. Kind of had a warlike nature, and they were men fit for war as they were described in First Chronicles, and that they settled on the east side or the Transjordan area, and were at the mercy of incursions from the Ammonites and the Moabites quite a bit, and that they were really the ones outside of the promised land, the first ones to be carried away into Assyria. In Hazael of Damascus comes against them, and in Saul and David's time, the Moabites and the Ammonites fully subdued them. But is it that they overcome in the end times? Is that what is kind of being alluded to there with that? And you can find that in Zephaniah. So, but they were ones that were to go to war, that they would stand up with individuals, with the exception of that area of Jabesh Gilead, that they're the ones that didn't go with that. For the most part, they stood with Barak, they stood with David, they stood with Gideon, they stood with the other tribes to take their land. And so I think that they were a tribe that could be counted on to come and fight when needed. And then in Moses, his account of that in Deuteronomy 33. Oops, no. I'm in Numbers, I'm so sorry. So in Deuteronomy 33, verse 20 through 22, and it says, and of Gad he said, blessed be he that enlargeth Gad, and he dwelleth as a lion, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. And he provided the first part for himself, because there, in a portion of the lawgiver, was he seated, and he came with the heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel. So he helped the other tribes in taking and defending their lands. Excuse me. And he dwelleth as a lion and teareth the arm with the crown of the head. Constant battle with the surrounding invaders, constantly battling from his eastern area, and then helping the other tribes as well. And then Jesus coming and defeating his enemies in the land, there in Jeremiah 49. Providing the first part for himself, because there, in a portion of the lawgiver, as he's seated and he came with the heads of the people. They did end up choosing their own land before going into the promised land, as we learn of those 2.5 tribes, the Reuben, Gad, and the half Manasseh, that they chose their own land instead of allowing the Lord to provide the land for them. So they did put themselves first for the first part for themselves in this. But they did have a strong commitment to justice, righteousness, although they failed many times, as we've discussed with, the men of Jabesh Gilead not showing up. But then they did stand up and they did right with what they did for Saul and his sons, as well as fighting with and for the other tribes and that. So that is all that I have for the tribe of Gad. And so that's it. So we got through 2 tribes tonight. Get out of here.